going on? This is Ken Reynolds from the Seattle Dragons, and this is the XFL show.
This is the future. This is not the past.
The new XFL will kick off in 2020.
If you smell what the XFL is cooking.
It's still football, but it's professional football reimagined.
This is our moment, our story to tell. This is history begun.
This is the XFL!
Welcome, football fans. This is January 28th, 2020. This is For the Love of Football. This is the XFL show. I'm Alan.
I'm Vince.
And I'm Bryant.
Training camp cuts have been made, and each team is now down to their 52 players making up their initial rosters. It's episode 108. Exciting, fun, different. And it's the last week of no XFL games because next week is week 1. As Jake would say, Vince, closer than ever, and he's not here today, but it is the beginning of the last week of the preseason.
It's just hard to believe that, next time, 1 week from today, of course, we'll have another show later this week, but 1 week from today, we'll be breaking down games. It's game week next week, and that's something to really get excited about.
Yes, we'll be breaking down games next week, and Bryant, this time in 2 weeks, we will be reacting to the first week of the XFL. We're there, man. We're almost at the finish line.
Well, Alan, I hate to kind of pat myself on the back, but I feel like over this last 2-year journey, I've become a better, almost an expert in covering a football league that is about to happen. I need to catch up on how to cover a league once it's happening. Like I still don't know what to do when football actually starts playing, but we'll get there. I have my football coverage for dummies book in front of me. I can't wait for that 2-week mark. But next week we get to do some predictions as well. So a lot still to happen before kickoff.
Yeah, you're more of an expert on startup business coverage, but now you have to start, talking about the actual game like me and Vince love to do, and I'm sure you'll catch up and you'll catch along and you'll have a lot of fun with it. And today we're going to be doing a lot of the more football-oriented talk, finally, with players now official. 52-man rosters are set. The final cuts were made, and now each team has their initial rosters. We're going to break them down today, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to go through each team's roster, maybe speculate on what depth charts are going to look like and what the identity of each team might be now that we've gotten a taste of them at training camp and we see the personnel in a clearer picture. It's going to be an interesting discussion. That's coming up in the hot read today, but we also are going to be discussing some other things going on in the league, including odds. Yes, the regular season win totals are out. Vince, I can't wait to discuss this with you. Caesars put it out. We're going to have to talk about that. We also are going to hit some of what Bob Stoops was saying on the sidelines, and you might hear from him throughout the show. Thanks to the Dallas Renegades for sending us clips from Bob Stoops and Landry Jones talking to the media on the sideline after practice earlier this week, and a lot of good stuff to talk about when it comes to the Renegades because they do have the most high-profile quarterback, Vince, but unfortunately he's banged up. That is a scenario we need to discuss, and oh my, Bryant had some fun at a block party for the Wildcats we're going to have to hear about as well.
Yeah, Alan, we're going to have to talk about that because that was a lot of fun. I will say this, though, fans, speaking personally from being at one of these stadiums, 2 of them already, Alan, we've already I've checked 2 off the list. I don't know how many you've checked. Get your tickets if you haven't already. This is going to be one of the most amazing things to be a part of. If you have a chance to be a part of an opening weekend in DC, New York, Houston, or Seattle, do it. Go to get your tickets, xfl.com/tickets, or maybe go to the rules page like Vince likes to do, and then find your way to the tickets page. That's the best way to get your tickets, I guess. But go and get your tickets because seats are going to sell. We've already talked about Seattle. I know LA is doing really well. It's going to be a good, crisp time when you get to that football stadium.
Yes.
A good crisp experience in those seats.
That's what it's all about, getting your tickets, getting there for week one. Like we've said before on the show, being one of the first fans of a team, it's kind of, an honor. It's very rare, an exciting thing to do if you're a big football fan, to call yourself the first fan of a team. I mean, who could say that in their lifetime? So that's the chance. And also, the chance to see actual football being played, even though the Super Bowl coming up is going to end that NFL season, Vince. Football is not about to end, and it's a different kind of feeling here at the end of January, where usually, we're getting on a different kind of road at this time of year, but we're about to be on the road through a new football season.
Yeah. Usually, this week, all you hear from people is like, "Oh my God, I can't believe there's only one more football game left of the year." And I tell them, well, after this one game this Sunday, there's 43 more football games to be excited about, and I'm excited for each and every one of them.
Absolutely. And if you're hyped, if you're excited, let us hear from you at XFL Show on Twitter, and ask us any questions. Shoot us any thoughts, any remarks. If you think the things we're saying on the show are really, really stupid and you want to challenge us, bring it on. That's what it's all about. Discussion, argument, but in a very, very safe space. That's what this is. We respect each other. We never name call unless you say something really dumb, and then it's fair game. Because I have a feeling a lot of that is going to need to happen when the games begin and we get even more heated, Bryant. That's about to happen. When the season starts, it's on this podcast, and I'm calling you out for all the dumb things you're about to say.
Well, I thought we were both Wildcats fans. I don't understand why you would do such a thing. I mean, I can understand the animosity between us and Vince, and us and perhaps Jake once he decides to pick his freaking team that we've been waiting so long for.
Oh, that's coming up.
Why you and me?
Jake says he is going to be picking a team, but unfortunately, Brian, I'm going to, probably be rooting for the Wildcats, but, not as openly as you, because I am, as an official podcast host for the league, I'm going to try to, refrain from being too biased. Unlike you, where you are just unabashedly a big Winston Moss honk. But I think most of that comes out of fear from what I heard with the interview that we're going to put up on YouTube, exclusive interview with another one with you and Winston Moss at the block party.
Didn't you see the man in Houston? He's intimidating. He looks at you and you get intimidated. I had no choice.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
When he says that Jonathan Hayes holds, guess what Jonathan Hayes does? He holds. That's how it works.
I don't know. Jonathan Hayes is pretty big too. I wouldn't want to say that to his face either. Let's get into it here, though. We got some little news and notes to get into before we get into those winning totals. Vince, how about Jim Zorn tabbing Brandon Silvers as the starter in Seattle? Per the Seattle Times, Jim Zorn said, quote, "He's probably been more effective throwing the ball. He doesn't move as well as BJ Daniels, but his concern is to do what he does well. BJ's coming on, and we have high expectations for him, but we can only play one at a time, so it will be Brandon Silvers week one for the Seattle Dragons whenever they go to DC, Vince."
Yeah, and you can't argue with that logic there. He said a lot in that sentence without saying very much in that, better at effectively throwing the ball. That's what the quarterback position's all about, as far as I'm concerned. So Jim Zorn, he knows quarterbacks. So you got to be behind his decision, I guess I should say. And BJ Daniels, that's a hell of a backup too. You can't really complain too much about that.
No, that's a good situation they have in Seattle. I like it, but I've been saying the whole time, Bryant, it was Silvers the whole way through. He ends up winning it. You were saying it was more up in the air, but it is set in stone. Zorn has spoken.
He has, Alan, and I just kind of question only the simple fact that, was there even a competition? I guess that's what we know, that Brandon Silvers was the assigned quarterback. I feel like this is going to be the trend that we're going to see probably with, I would say, at least 6 of the teams. The only exception would be LA because Luis Perez isn't on the roster, and Landry Jones because he's on the injured list. So this might be the first of the 6 I think we're going to see pretty much are going to start based on those assigned QBs.
Yeah, I think we're going to see all the assigned QBs at least week 1, but over the course of a season, who knows? And that's really in a 10 week season, Vince. I mean, the impact of injuries are going to be compounded, more severe, more consequential, more important to have your backups ready in a 10-week season.
Yeah, there's going to be a fine line between making the playoffs and being on the outside looking in. And you see that reflected in these win totals that we're going to be talking about here. And so, yeah, you missed a quarterback for 2 games. That's a quarter of your season. That's massive.
Yeah, it is. So, you have to have backups who are capable. Brandon Silvers beats out BJ Daniels, but I got to tell you, if something happens up in Seattle or if they make some kind of change, I think they're equipped. We watch them play too. So that's a good situation to have, I think, for the Seattle Dragons. 2 capable quarterbacks with really unique skill sets too, especially when you consider Jim Zorn was a running quarterback, so I'm sure he's kind of partial to BJ Daniels if he shows that he could throw the ball a little bit better in practice. We'll see as the season goes on, but there you go, some info coming up from the great Northwest, and we will discuss them in a little bit with their entire roster when we break them all down. Remember, this is a Tuesday morning if you're listening to the show right when it came out. We're doing double doses every single week now, Tuesday mornings, Thursday nights. So make sure you keep it locked to the feed. Subscribe on any podcast app. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you can, if you will. 5 stars so more people get made aware of the XFL as a league throughout the season whenever they're searching podcasts, and they can keep up and follow along. We can all talk football together over the course of the entire season. That's Tuesday mornings and Thursday nights, plus bonus minisodes that we are definitely planning on doing throughout the year. So things are picking up. It's getting hot and heavy in the studio, and it's going to get louder. It's going to get more fun. And here we are, the final week of preseason. And I know it's the final week because we're finally starting to see some promos on TV, Bryant. Fox ran theirs, and now finally ESPN ran one, and it was fire.
Yeah, we talked about this. We've been saying that this was going to happen. The exposure the XFL is going to be getting with these TV partners, and ESPN picked a great time to do it because during the Pro Bowl, great hype video, getting everybody set and ready. I don't recall. Yeah, I believe the Sunday evening game is on ESPN that first week. So I've been super hyped. I know more and more people are going to get hyped based on these videos.
Gotta love it. I mean, I was with the future in-laws, and it came on the TV, and they honestly didn't even realize. They knew that I was doing an official podcast for the XFL, but they didn't realize this thing's going to be on ABC, Fox, ESPN. And when future mother-in-law saw that, her jaw was on the floor, Vince. She didn't realize that this is the real deal.
The message is going to get put out loud and clear. There's no doubt in my mind. I think that this league and the broadcasts with the networks that they're on and the product that they plan to put out is really set up for success, specifically in these first few weeks. They're going to be so critical, and we'll see what happens if they can carry that success that we think that they're going to have through the rest of the season.
Well, do you feel like the buildup is there? Like that's the interesting part, right? Because you'll hear about it because we ended up talking to HBK, Heather Brooks Karatz, my best friend, on the show later with our good crisp interview. But I talked to her about how like we started from the bottom, and guess what? Now we're here, and where here is crazy. How many people are so interested and so hyped for this? I just wonder if that hype translates to people who still don't know about the league. Like, are there people out there who actually are going to get hyped in the next 2 weeks? And I think we kind of talked about that last week. I still think there are a few out there to be had. But like I said, the XFL is kind of where they are no matter what TV partner, at least for that first week. Maybe into week 2 and week 3, you're going to start gaining some more momentum. We might actually see ratings go up as the season goes on.
Yeah, the promos are real. It's really going to be on TV. That's right. Future mother-in-law, ESPN, Fox. Yeah, for real. And what about these now? The win totals. This is interesting. This is really good because not only are the win totals out from Caesar's Palace, and it might change, but I think they are drastic in how much credit and hype Caesars at least, is put behind the Tampa Bay Vipers. 7.5 win total, a full game and a half more than the next teams, the Houston Roughnecks and Dallas Renegades, Vince. That's a lot of trust they're putting in Trestman.
Well, that's true. I think, with so much uncertainty about, these teams that none of them, they haven't even played a real game together yet. So it's extremely difficult to predict. And so you got to think that the books are going to be focused on, who the consumer is going to be betting on. And you got to think that, the average person that they want betting on this kind of stuff is going to be looking at quarterbacks, and they're going to be looking at head coaches to make their decisions on who they're going to be betting on. You got to think that, like you said, Trestman and Aaron Murray, that's a pretty good combination. You got to think. So that's going to draw a lot of interest. And then we've also talked about on this program, and especially from hearing some of the reports that you guys were saying last week, down at the training camp, that this Western Conference with Dallas and Houston and LA, that's a gauntlet there that these teams are going to have to fight through. So it's going to be very interesting to see, maybe a softer schedule in the East for Tampa Bay if they could take advantage of that. And I'm thinking that's kind of the process that I could see leading to them certainly having the highest win total. Now, whether it should be a whole game and a half above the other teams, that's another story. But I think that was the thought process going into making that number.
It's not even just a game and a half. You can't even get the normal minus 110, minus 115. It's minus 125 at 7.5, which really means they're thinking 8.5. In comparison, the AAF, the Arizona Hotshots were the highest rated team, and they had a 6.5 to start the season. I think it has to do with Florida. They saw Orlando. I think they're skewing it. People are betting Tampa Bay, saying the Florida teams are going to do good, and that's why Tampa Bay's so skewed.
You think this is like or they're getting the Orlando Apollos rub here? Is that what's happening?
Yes, exactly.
I don't know about that. I think Vince brings up that we're going to break down the rosters, and I think you do see on paper the Vipers have some things that make them stand out. And of course, Mark Trestman, who I have, said a lot of things on this show about in terms of the experience and the trust I have in him to go out and win in the Eastern Conference in the XFL. I really do like Tampa Bay, but I got to say I'm shocked that they were picked as the team with the most wins in the entire league, let alone the East, Vince. And that stands out. They know. I guess you're saying though a lot of what people might be betting on might have influenced this. They expect
well that's to bet on them? When they set these numbers, these numbers are designed to get a certain type of person to bet a lot of money on these outcomes, and the number is also designed to deter or limit a certain type of person to bet on these outcomes. They want the public betting as much money as they possibly can, and they want to keep the sharps away as much as they can. And so that's why, where they're, constructing these numbers. They want to entice people. You guys just made a great argument talking about how you're surprised that maybe Tampa Bay was rated that high, and you're looking at 7.5 wins. That's saying that they could go 7-3, and you could win on the under, and they're taking away the juice at only minus 105. That seems, you're probably saying that's a pretty good bet, and you're going to go out there and bet that. Well, maybe that's exactly what they want you to do.
It's going in almost blind. It's a brand new league. It's so intriguing. Enticing.
And now this is just one book's opinion, and this is Caesar's Palace, who you could probably classify not necessarily the squarest book, but not necessarily considered one of the sharpest either. I'm very interested to see what Ed Salmons has prepared over at the Westgate Superbook if he releases any of these regular season win total numbers. It's going to be fascinating to see how this varies from book to book. I'm even fascinated to see what the opening lines are coming out for week one and where they stand on this stuff going from book to book. Eventually, it's all going to even out to be about the same. But the starting numbers are fascinating.
Jake's like,
what's so funny?
No, I'd say Jake will love it because he just wants to go with the 5.
Yeah,
for everyone.
Well,
5 and 5 for everyone.
The parity is what the league is aiming for. You want all the teams to be in it, and the way the season's designed in terms of the scheduling, it's the end of the year is going to be, full of opportunity for teams that maybe even stumble out of the gates. So you're right, Vince. I think going to even out, and I would be actually kind of shocked if a team gets over 7 wins this season. I'll say that. We're not making our official predictions quite yet, but we're getting there, and I think I could throw one out there. An 8-win team in year one I would be very surprised, just because I think it will be pretty even out there. But, the books are kind of getting you to look at Tampa Bay a little bit. Exciting stuff. That really is a sign also that things are real. Preseason's just about over, baby. Last bit of dinking and dunking to do here. According to the Washington Post, Jake Russell reporting the DC Defenders and their defensive coordinator, Jeff Fitzgerald, will be parting ways. Jeff Fitzgerald resigned to be closer to family. So now passing game coordinator and secondary coach Louis Siafi will be taking over as the DC in DC, Vince. And hate to see that for the Defenders, losing their coordinator right before the season, but such is life in the game of football.
Yeah, that's just the way this business goes sometimes. Other teams have lost coaches, they've lost players, but it's starting to get crunch time here, and we've talked about how real this is getting, and not a good time to lose somebody on your staff.
I will say though, compared to what we saw last year with the AAF, and compared to what we see in the NFL with players and coaching staff changes right before the season, and injuries, throw that in there too. Just shakeups right before you're about to kick off. Pretty clean in that regard, except for this instance, Bryant, going into the season. We do have a full week before kickoff, or a little over a week before kickoff, but this was a bad one to lose your defensive coordinator. No way to. I would not say that's a good thing whatsoever. Although I'm sure Louis Siafi could step in and do well for Pep Hamilton. But across the league, we didn't see a whole lot of this, and I think overall it's a pretty good thing.
Yeah, the stability is what Oliver Luckett always talked about. They want some stability there with all the teams. I believe St. Louis lost their offensive coordinator though.
Yeah, but they replaced them with Chuck Long, which a lot of people are really excited about. Battlehawks fans are super hyped about. And then you throw in kind of the Iowa connection he already has with his head coach, Jonathan Hayes. And then Bob Stoops also just across the league. I mean, you got this fraternity in there, a lot of familiarity, and I think that's a good thing for St. Louis. We talked a little bit about that last week, but overall these coaching staffs are pretty solid. I know you're really interacting with the LA coaching staff a whole lot, and that is a tight-knit group. And then we saw how Kevin Gilbride's staff, I mean, what Chris Dishman was doing there with the defensive backs. I mean, we've seen I've talked to, and we saw in Houston, a lot of these coaches are, I'd say some of them even more hyped than the players to get out there in week one.
Yeah, Alan, and really the coaches themselves are as hyped as some of the players. I was at the LA block party this past weekend. There was, I want to say, a few thousand fans there. I mean, it was incredible. We got to walk on the field. I got to have some great conversations with a lot of players and coaches, getting some insights there. So everything is moving in the right direction. Yeah, we're losing coaches here and there, but really, at least in terms of the Wildcats and what I'm seeing when I'm out in Houston and all this is that everybody's kind of ready for the season to begin. It's been a long runway, and the block party was just part of that excitement that everybody's bringing to this team. That the players were hyped, like I said, the coaches were hyped.
How was that atmosphere? How was it? You were walking around the field talking to everybody. What was that like?
Yeah, it was just, talking to fans and everyone, seeing everybody excited, actually, knowing while they're there, taking the time out on a Saturday afternoon, right in the middle of the day. So it's not like you could really plan something in the morning and then do this, or plan something at night after you've done this, because it was right in the middle of the afternoon and people took the time to really go out of their way and enjoy their time. And I was having this is insane, but I don't know how this happened, Alan. You would have enjoyed this. I was sitting there interviewing Coach Moss, and there was a man and his son standing off to the side. So I ended the conversation with Coach Moss because I didn't want to keep him from meeting Coach Moss. Well, Coach Moss walks away, and the man and his son come up to me, and they said, "Are you Bryant from the XFL show?" And I was like, yeah. He's like, "Oh my God, I listen to you every single day." I was like, what is going on right now? I don't even understand. I couldn't even comprehend. But believe it or not, that man came all the way down from Fresno.
You're going to go on to this official XFL podcast and lie to my face.
Not lying. There are plenty of witnesses to what happened. If you're listening to this show, tweet the picture, because I know you have it, of you and us at XFL Show on Twitter, because I know you took it. It was a great moment. He says he listens to us on his long walks every Sunday. I told him he's going to have to take another long walk because we're going to 2 shows now every week. But yeah, it was just fun. Awesome. It was fun to be a part of it, even that little spot, because the players were doing this the entire time. I got to do it once, and it was pretty exciting.
Definitely encourage you to go to things like the block parties. They're happening all across the league. Teams are having their get-togethers with fans, and that sounds like a really good time. And, it's interesting because, a lot of people go to those events, Brian. They don't really know any of the players or the coaches, but they actually get to know them, like meet them and learn about them. It's going to make them root even harder for their team come kickoff.
It really is, and the stage was feet away from these fans, and everybody just kind of every player got introduced. There was no security holding people back. There wasn't, any like long lines to meet anyone. Everybody was just wandering freely, shaking hands, taking pictures. It really was a great time.
Sweet. Awesome. That LA Wildcats block party sounded like a good time, and I know that because I saw you on social media, but also you gave us some interviews to play. We have the Good Crisp interview coming up, short one with Heather Brooks Karatz, the LA Wildcats president, and then also if you go to the XFL YouTube channel and go to our playlist, This is the XFL Show, we will have 2 exclusive interviews Bryant did while he was at the block party with Coach Winston Moss and Boogie Roberts.
Yeah, Boogie Roberts was really excited too. I think he kind of knew who we were. So go check that out on the official XFL YouTube at youtube.com/XFL.
All right, is that going to be your new bit now on the show? You're just going to say people know who we are? People know who I am? Is that your new thing?
If Jake gets to say we're closer than ever, you let Vince say they're listening. You never let me have anything. I got to figure out something to say. But really, you just never know, because if you listen to the XFL show, you'll realize that anything could happen in the XFL.
This is true. Especially when Bob Stoops is on the sideline talking to the media, giving all sorts of good details about the Dallas Renegades. And we're going to get into it right now. It's time for this week's Cover 2.
Going to be exciting and fun, different.
Exciting, fun, and different. That's what it's like when you're raising hell for the Dallas Renegades. Bob Stoops took a moment to talk to the media, Vince, on the sideline during first practice on Monday, and gave some interesting information regarding his quarterback, Landry Jones. Landry Jones also was available to the media, and courtesy of the Renegades, we're going to play you a couple clips from what they said, give you a little insight into what might be going down at the quarterback position for the Renegades come week 1.
He's getting better. He threw some drills yesterday and moving a little bit better every day. So, we're optimistic. We'll see. I couldn't tell you a timetable, but he's progressing really well right now.
That's what I'm shooting for. Mm-hmm. Yeah, shooting for week 1, and then I think worst case scenario week 2.
Mm-hmm.
There it is, worst case scenario out of Landry Jones' mouth there, Vince, week 2. And I think that would be big, because any more than that, I would think would be detrimental to the Dallas Renegades not having him out there.
Yeah, when this news first came out, it seemed like it was going to be much worse than that. So, if this guy can show up and play and be effective in week 1, or even if it was week 2, I think that's a huge win, not just for the Dallas Renegades, but for the XFL as a whole. This was the first guy. This guy was the one in all of these players that are in this league on these 52-man rosters. So this is absolutely huge. This is, I think, of week one, and we're going to be talking about it next week. I feel like a lot of eyeballs are going to be on this Dallas Renegades team because of Bob Stoops, who still can't believe he's in the league, as well as Landry Jones, a guy who's started several games in the NFL.
Yeah, and Philip Nelson has a huge load to carry until Landry Jones is back in the lineup. Eric Dungy was brought in there, Bryant, but he got a little bit banged up when he first got with Dallas there in Houston during training camp and missed some practice time. So really, Philip Nelson is their only kind of conditioned quarterback who's going to be out there in week one. Eric Dungy's going to back him up until Landry Jones is ready to go, but a lot on Philip Nelson's plate starting the season off for the Dallas Renegades.
Next man up. It has to be that mentality, especially in the XFL. You can't, assume that the player that you wanted to play is going to be able to play, and that's just the game of football. So Philip Nelson is a capable quarterback. I believe he San Diego Fleet, if I'm not mistaken. And so we've seen him compete in the spring before, so he's used to this type of environment. I expect him to do well enough. What are you laughing at?
He's good at playing in the first quarter of the year. That's what you're saying.
That wasn't him. That was Mike Berkovicki that got his head knocked off. Come on now, Vince.
Yeah, that was the other guy.
AAF.
Get it going. Walk through.
All right, so Bob Stoops hurrying us along here, Vince. Also, Lance Dunbar, Bob Stoops said, was a little bit banged up to finish off training camp, but says he should be good to go and is expecting big things from the running back for the Renegades as well. And, man, the Renegades obviously are going to get a lot of attention, but they have had some hurdles to jump over before the season even starts. I am interested to see how they respond. They looked pretty good when we saw them in their scrimmage, but not having your quarterback out there week one, I don't know. They have that new field though, Vince. It's gonna be that converted baseball park into a football stadium, and it's gonna be, I think, a rowdy atmosphere. So week one at home without Landry Jones is probably a good thing. You got to think about that as well.
Yeah, well, home or away, I'm not quite sure how much these home fields are really going to affect things. I think we really got to get some more data. We got to get some more data points during the season.
I agree, but I mean, I'm going to tell you, at least for St. Louis and Seattle, I expect very good, crisp home field advantages there.
I don't know if that's. I'm not sure if I agree with that. But
what are you gonna? So Vince, next week when we do our big season preview show where we're gonna predict the season, are you gonna say I can't make predictions because I have to wait until the middle of the season to get more data?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in my power rankings, if I'm not making a large point adjustments for home and away at this time.
Okay, well that makes sense. To each his own. I think for some teams it will matter, and some it won't. Just like it does across, I think, any sport. But being at least having home cooking without your quarterback is always a good thing. I don't care if it's the first week in a league's existence or a big rivalry game in college football. That's a good thing, I think, for Bob Stoops' Dallas Renegades. The fact that they are home in week one. And they will be welcoming the St. Louis Battlehawks. But let's move on to cut day or cut weekend or whatever you want to call it. We got our 52-man rosters, and we're going to break those down in just a little bit. But real quick, the standout cuts and additions that we've noticed from across the league. I have a handful here, and if feel free to throw any more out if you guys know of any or thought of any. But, obviously, the big one, literally, that stands out, Sean Oakman back on the LA Wildcats roster, Bryant. That is just a very,
shocker?
very
surprising.
Yeah. I'm speechless. Basically
exciting,
speechless,
fun,
because
different.
A player that was exciting, fun, and different because. We were
exciting and fun, different.
Honestly, we were all hyped to see such a mammoth human being playing for the LA Wildcats, but then he got cut, and it was apparently for some sort of issue, and he wasn't fitting in, I guess, is kind of what the team alluded to whenever they cut him. But now he's back, reconciled, all about second chances, Vince. But what do you make of this?
I'm not in that locker room. I don't know what the circumstances were exactly why he was cut the first time. We know he's got a somewhat troubled past. So it's very difficult to comment as to what was going on in that locker room. Obviously, he's made amends with the organization and the league, but I'm just very surprised to see something like that this early in the XFL.
Yeah, Bryant, you were there at the block party. You I'm sure didn't get, you weren't prying, but could you at least gauge the atmosphere? Sean Oakman was there. Was he getting along with everybody? What was that like? Was it awkward?
It was not awkward. It was all smiles. He was dancing. I did have a moment to have a little side conversation with him, just kind of asking him how excited he was to be back. And the excitement's there. The skill level's there. I talked to Coach Moss. Moss was excited to have him, the way he introduced them. Things like this just kind of happened. It was a shocker when he got cut. It was a shocker when he came back. But sometimes it's just a phone call and things can be amended. Maybe he just went back home and read whatever the Wildcat way meant and came back and passed the test. I mean, it could be as simple as something like that. So either way, I think the Wildcats are happy to have him back. It was just a very interesting circumstances that led to his cut and his return, I guess, to the Wildcats.
Yeah, I'm sure they're happy to have him back. You know who's not happy? June Jones and everyone on the Houston Roughnecks, because now they do have to plan on stopping Sean Oakman from getting to Phillip Walker or Connor Cook in week 1, and just makes that matchup even more exciting. I gotta say, I'm pumped that he's back in the league. Even more pumped that he's back with the Wildcats. And we get to talk about Sean Oakman throughout the season. Hopefully he stays on the roster. Other interesting standout cuts and additions. Raheem Moore, Vince, the safety, got cut from D.C. A player with that kind of background. He did fall out in the NFL, but you expected a guy like that with all that history to be able to make it onto an XFL roster, and just didn't make the DC final roster. Interesting.
Yeah, a guy with a high pedigree for sure, Alan. I'm pretty surprised by it myself. But at the same time, that's what the training camp was for, was to find out, who's still got it and who doesn't and who wants it. And that's what we saw here in these cuts, specifically with Raheem Moore.
Yeah. And here, Bryant, you sent me this one earlier too. Jordan Westerkamp, the DC defender receiver, got cut. We saw him take a wallop and score a big TD. He looked pretty good in the scrimmage we saw him playing in, but did not make the final roster either for the Defenders.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say maybe he wasn't fast enough for the DC Defenders.
Yeah, Pep Hamilton needs him fast. You're right. He was tough. Definitely a tough receiver, but yeah. And then another one, throw this one out there. Seattle signs Garrett Hartley. We kind of alluded to that last week. Garrett Hartley was saying, look out, XFL, here I come. But in doing that, they cut Cole Tracy, who was, a great college football kicker for LSU. And is now out there for another team to pick up if they are still looking for kickers. But Seattle went with the former Saint instead of the former LSU Tiger, Vince.
Yeah, I was, certainly Garrett Hartley, a guy, who's done it at the highest level. But Cole Tracy, I had a lot of high hopes for this kid. And I was kind of surprised to see this. I mean, if you look at Seattle's roster, Cole Tracy, was probably one of the top 5 most famous players on that whole roster, specifically down here in the Southeast. So I guess they won out in the end, but still, they let go of a good guy.
We got any others?
Well, I was going to say, Alan, you're talking kickers, and was there any long snappers, Alan, that you were really curious about? Just before I throw the next name I'm going to throw out, you're good on long snappers.
No, all the long snappers I thought would make their team did, so that's really solid. I'm excited for them. Good.
I will say that the shocker that I was not expecting and that ended up happening was St. Louis's second round pick in that skill level draft. That's Brogan Roback. Everybody expected him to battle for that starting position, and he didn't even make the 52-man roster. So he's out in St. Louis.
Yeah, I got to say I'm not surprised by that, considering that they signed Nick Fitzgerald last week. Right, Vince? I mean, when you got a guy like that who was just one of the better SEC quarterbacks for a while, someone had to go in St. Louis. Yeah. They had 4 quarterbacks.
Yeah, and Fitzgerald, he had one tough runner that guy is, doing it at the highest level in the collegiate game. And, not that bad of a thrower either. Not obviously not quite good enough to make the NFL at this time. But this guy, believe me when I say this, has a ton of potential, an excellent competitor, and I expect him to give it his all.
Yeah, and now you got a Bulldog, you got Jordan Ta'amu, the Rebel, Taylor Heineke, who's got NFL experience as well. I mean, that's a solid quarterback room, even still there with the St. Louis Battlehawks, and we'll break down their roster here in just a minute. But real quick, let's take it to Bryant and his chat with his good buddy, Heather Brooks Karatz. You talked to her, the president of the Wildcats, best friend, at the block party. So set us up here. Bryant, what are you guys going to get into?
It was a short conversation because things were moving pretty quickly. So the quality is not great because there's a lot of music and a lot of noise going on in the back. So bear with us on that. But really, I just wanted to talk to Heather because, back in the summer of 2019, I met Heather at across the street from where we were, from Dignity Health Sports Park. We met across the street at a Buffalo Wild Wings. And I really just wanted to talk to her about where we were to where we are and how awesome it's been and how this is going to keep progressing as the season continues.
Awesome. Let's go to it. It's this week's Good Crisp interview with LA Wildcats president Heather Brooks Karatz.
Good crisp football.
All right, football fans, I'm here with Heather Brooks Karatz, president of the LA Wildcats. Heather, we talked earlier about how 7 months ago we were across the street at Buffalo Wild Wings. There's a few people here. How does it feel to have it turned into this?
Well, let me just tell you, that's what best friends are all about. Bryant, you were there from the beginning. There was 10, 15 of us sitting around a table, and now we are at our new home, Dignity Health Sports Park. We are here with our team, and just seeing hundreds of fans out here. The energy has shifted. We are so psyched for February 16th.
This team has been on the road for ever. I mean, they're finally back in LA. It's great to have the team back in LA to represent the city. I'm sure we can expect them to be all around town leading up to the season.
Oh, yeah. We are all about LA and all about Carson. We're so psyched to have the players here. We'll be practicing at Long Beach City College. Stay tuned for information on open practices. We want to have our fans there when we can be. And get ready for February 16th, because that day when we step on the field here, I promise you that game day experience is going to include all kinds of opportunities for fans to be close to the action.
I saw you down in Houston. I was down there as a podcaster. You're down there as the president. How does it feel to be around all the other presidents, all the other team? Because that was a full-on work. I mean, there was tons of people there working to make this happen. It was amazing to my eyes. How did it feel to be down there and actually get with all the other presidents and make this a success?
I mean, it's amazing how this has all come together. I mean, it's been done with such thoughtfulness to make sure that the foundation is being built the right way. But it was truly an army of people down there. You don't really know what happens behind the scenes to build a league from the ground up. And we've got an amazing team, not just here in LA, but across the country.
You do have a little bit of extra runway with the week 2 start, but really, how much comfort can that really bring? Because we're right around the corner, 2 weeks to kick off, 3 weeks to the home opener. What can fans expect when they arrive here at Dignity Health Sports Park for a Wildcats game on February 16th?
Yeah, so first off, fandom is earned, right? And it's something that takes time to build, and we're building it the right way. So everyone will be there on February 16th so you can be there from day one. But it's going to be awesome. We're announcing a bunch of game day initiatives this coming week, so stay tuned. We've already talked about our parking. It's going to be $20 as well to park and tailgate, which in LA is super affordable, which aligns with our affordable ticket prices. But in addition to that, we're going to have a great fan festival, the biggest party you've ever seen before a football game. It is going to be here, so do not miss it. There'll be a Cub Zone for the little ones, which really works for me and my 2 little 4-year-olds.
Well, a lot of discussion. We talked to Jeffrey Pollack, and he said fans want to come to a football game, not just to watch a football game. So I'm sure those initiatives are going to be geared towards fans so that they can come here and not just have a football game, but actually have a whole day's worth of an experience.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're 8 or 80, I promise you there's going to be something for you here. It's going to be fun.
Oh, that was great quality. Good, crisp quality there at the block party, Bryant. You sounded fine.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you to my best friend, Heather Brooks Karatz. Always a pleasure talking to her. I've had, Alan, you saw how happy she is and how excited she looks whenever we're around football. She saw her in Houston, so it's always good to catch up with her and just ask her a few questions and pick her brain on how things are moving along for the Wildcats. And I think you can take that same strategy. I know we talked to her a lot, and we talked a lot about the Wildcats, but it's just how all the teams are kind of operating in terms of that presidential mentality, right? All the presidents are working together. They're not like the coaches where they're trying to beat each other. The presidents are working with each other to make this a huge success.
All right, let's talk about that roster in LA, and maybe we'll hit them up first. It's time to talk 52-man rosters. They are finalized in this week's Hot Read. Okay, starting with the LA Wildcats, Vince. If you're looking at their roster here, 52-man, Winston Moss's crew will be going with Jalen McClendon, Chad Knopf, and Josh Johnson as their 3 quarterbacks. No Luis Perez. Obviously, that's the first thing that stands out. The fact that their assigned quarterback is not there. The other assigned guy, they got Josh Johnson, will be the head man. What do you think of that QB room in LA?
It's gonna be interesting to see what Josh Johnson has left here to see what he can do. I guess you would think he'd be the starter at this point, but I guess Bryant will tell us for sure. But I don't, not the strongest of rooms, I would say, comparing to all the other rosters.
I think you're underestimating the powers of Josh Johnson. He's a highly coveted QB who I think is going to stand out. And then what Jalen McClendon was showing off down there at Houston, Brian, this is maybe the most underestimated QB room then.
I really think so. I mean, you think about what LA did with their QBs, right? They ended up getting 2 assigned quarterbacks and then trading one away. I mean, and really, I think they traded Luis Perez away for a 3rd stringer because I felt like Jalen McClendon is solidified as that backup, maybe even the starter. I didn't get any insight on who exactly will be starting games. I assume it'll be Josh Johnson, but I think that room is a lot more solid than you think, Vince. Maybe not in namesake, but in quarterback play, from what we saw, Alan, I think Jalen McClendon can bring it.
Yeah, and now, really, if you're looking at the identity of this team on their 52-man roster, you have to start with 2 position groups, and that is the LA Wildcats offensive line, which is gigantic, anchored by Storm Norton, and they've got Patrick Vahe. I mean, these are beasts. Nico Saragusa is going to be out there. Who knows exactly who's going to be starting for them? Fred Lauina. I mean, they've got big, massive dudes. And then the linebacking core is my favorite part of this team, anchored by Trey Williams and Tywan Jones, Quentin Gause there as well, and of course Anthony Johnson, Willie Mays on the edges. Vince, the linebackers and I think the offensive line are what stand out for the LA Wildcats, a team that's going to be able to punch you in the mouth on offense, and a team that's really going to be able to hit you hard on defense.
Yeah, and you talked about that offensive line, the size there. You talk about how they're looking to use the fullback a lot, but also, this team, even at the wide receiver position, to me, a very physical team. I'm looking specifically at Adonis Jennings, wide receiver out of Temple. This kid is a big-bodied wide receiver, not afraid to get out there and block and put somebody on their keister.
All right, so as we run through these rosters, we could now speculate on their depth charts, what those might look like. In any certain position, Brian, if you want to pick one. I mean, we could only speculate because depth charts aren't out yet, and then also we gotta whittle these rosters down to just one word. What this team's about on paper. So I'll start the LA Wildcats. I'm gonna say hurt. They're out to hurt. This is a team that can hurt you. The physicality, but that translates to pain. This is a team that can hurt you. And I think when we see them out there, we're going to see those edges. The depth chart with Sean Oakman, Willie Mays, and then you've got Kimbo on the edge. This is a defensive line that is also going to be, I think, one of the best in the XFL.
My word would be DE for defensive ends, because right now you have Sean Oakman on one end, and then you have Devin Taylor, who's no small individual. They brought him in after camp out of South Carolina. He's a massive individual. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the team. I'm really looking forward to looking at this defensive line for the Wildcats.
Are you speculating at this point that they're going to be playing a 3-4 scheme?
I don't know if it would go 3-4, but with Devin Taylor, Sean Oakman, and Anthony Johnson, you can run any type of defense you really want, to be honest with you. That's some speed and that's some size on the edges, for sure.
Yeah, I think they're going to be pretty multiple, too, Vince. They got a lot of guys they could rotate in. Interesting, though, defensive rotations are going to be tough to pull off because of the fast play clock. Yeah, they do have a lot of guys that are capable, though. What's your one word for the LA Wildcats roster?
I hate to even give one in fear of offending Bryant.
How are you going to offend them? What are you going to say something negative about them?
Go ahead, Vince. Anything you say won't offend me.
You never know the way words could be interpreted.
Anything you say won't offend me, Vince. Go ahead. First word that comes to your head.
I don't know. I don't know. I can't put my finger on this team.
I'm offended.
There you go.
Vince's word is unknown. All right, let's go now to the Houston Roughnecks, the team that the Wildcats will be playing in Week 1, and break down their final 52. And starting with the quarterbacks, as we are, we got PJ, Phillip Walker, and Connor Cook, the QBs for June Jones. I say either one of them you throw out there, playing for June Jones, they're going to sling it, and they're going to be really good. For June Jones, it's all about the wide receivers. You have to look at those. And when you look at Khalil Lewis, Sammy Coates, Cam Phillips, these guys all stood out in camp. They were all picked high, Bryant. Wide receiver is where it's at on this roster.
It's where we expected it to be, right? Still no tight end on this roster, at least not on the 52-man. So they're going to roll with 4 or 5 wideouts. Alan, we really didn't see that much in Houston from Houston with their interesting formations with wideouts, but that's because they're all playing. That's just gamesmanship right there. They're not giving away their hand. I think this roster molded itself pretty straightforward in terms of the offense. The defensive side, I'll be interested to see what Vince says, because they're heavy on that linebacker. Heavy in the linebacker position.
Yeah, they do have a lot of linebackers there. And you need guys that can be multiple, as Alan was talking about. And so it's going to be very important to have guys that could be on the field and cover the whole area.
Well, that's my one word for this roster: coverage. Because I think you might be talking about the best pair of corners on one team in the league on the Houston Roughnecks. Savion Smith, Janae Harris, the corners, Vince, for this team are legit. I think those guys can cover anybody.
I've been on record saying I think cornerback is going to be one of the most valuable positions in this whole entire league. Most important, most difficult to play. And if you got 2 of the best ones, I remember you, Alan, saying that. I think you also gave some high regards to the New York Guardians. Defensive backs, which I guess we'll be getting into a little bit later.
Yep, we'll be hitting the Guardians roster in just a minute. Bryant, you got a word for the Roughnecks roster as a whole?
I'm going to throw a hyphen in between my 2 words, and I'm going to say well drafted. They held back 44 of their originally drafted players, tied for most in the league with Seattle. Houston had a game plan. They stuck with it. They enjoyed what they have, and now they're going to roll with it through the season.
And Vince, what about running back? Bulk of the carries for this team, if they run the ball ever.
Well, I'll tell you, Andre Williams, running back out of Boston College, I think this kid is a very good runner, very capable. And if this is a June Jones run and shoot type team, I'm excited to see what this kid can do.
There they are, the Houston Roughnecks. The LA Wildcats rosters are set. They take each other on Saturday night, February 8th, in the second game ever in the XFL. Now let's go to the New York Guardians. You alluded to them, Vince. We'll talk about them. We saw their team in action, and their roster is now finalized. They will, I think, have a solid offensive line with getting Damian Mama from the LA Wildcats. And also they already had Garrett Brumfield, the former LSU Tiger, who's a pretty damn good interior lineman. And they're going to need to have a strong offensive line, because I think they've got 2 running backs and maybe even more. From what we saw to Darius Victor, who I didn't really know a whole lot about, honestly, until we saw him at camp. I expected Justin Stockton and Tim Cook to look really good, because I knew about those guys, but we saw Darius Victor. Those are 3 legit running backs, and now revamped offensive line throughout training camp. Bryant, this offense for New York could be pretty formidable.
It can. I think there's some holes in there that at the quarterback position specifically with Matt McGloin probably going to be taking the helm. Marquise Williams, though, did look good. We saw the size of this team was kind of not what we saw in St. Louis, I guess you could say. But
they're not. Yeah, they're not the biggest.
I mean, that's everywhere. That's everywhere in the league.
They're not
right?
the biggest team. No, that's for sure.
They are not the biggest team, but they will be well disciplined, and I do expect that based on what I've seen from their coaches. Vince. Again, another team that seems to be very heavy in the linebacker, but we saw their corners, and they can cover. Their DBs are phenomenal. I expect a lot of blitzing out of the Guardians based on the coverage that their DBs are able to accomplish.
You don't think? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, if your guys are good enough, you're not afraid to put them on islands. Even a guy like Drayvon Henry, safety out of West Virginia. This kid also has good cover corner skills. I might add, excellent hips on that kid. He could play inside in the slot if he has to. He's got the size to play outside. Just a good all-around defensive back.
I mean, there's legitimate, I'd say 4 guys, maybe 5 guys in the defensive backfield for the Guardians who were all standouts in college, and then playmakers. These guys could, they could honestly be the best secondary overall on paper and on the field. Come kickoff, the Guardians got a lot going on, and yeah, we've talked about him. Chris Dishman is their defensive back coach, and I think he's doing a phenomenal job already. Just seeing how those guys they basically ran practice for the Guardians. They dictated everything, and we'll see how the quarterback is interesting because now they do have Luis Perez, kind of putting the pressure on Matt McGloin to do well, and he already had Marquise Williams, who I think is capable. You brought him up a lot, Bryant. You love him. I think McGloin is, because he's more experienced, is going to get the first crack, but I don't think he's going to have too long of a leash under Kevin Gilbride. They're going to need to see some results right away, and in an East that people are saying is going to be dominated by the Vipers. Apparently, I don't know. You gotta go out there and you got to prove something on offense. If you're going to have a great defense like this, you don't have to do too much if you're Matt McGloin, I think. We'll see, though. It's all up in the air. Let's go to their opponents for week number 1. It is those Tampa Bay Vipers, quarterback by Aaron Murray, and alongside him you have Taylor Cornelius and Chase Litton, Vince, but Taylor Cornelius, the one guy who I could maybe see starting a game for this team down the road, but how supplanted do you think Aaron Murray is as the QB there in Tampa?
I think he's going to be given every and all opportunities to be a franchise player. This kid was a big time, college recruit. People thought the world of this kid, and I think he is really going to show his stuff. Just great arm talent on this kid, and I can't wait to see what he's going to do.
I'm trying to look at the roster now, though, and figure out why odds makers are saying 7.5 wins for this team. Aaron Murray was a good college.
Florida.
I don't think it's just because they play in Florida either, though. I think it's because when you
you got to explain yourself.
I don't know the Florida connection there, Brian.
The Orlando Rage and the Orlando Apollos have done very well in spring football in the last 2 significant spring football leagues.
If you played,
Vince, you talk about casual bettors. Those are the types of things casual bettors think about.
No. I think they think about players like.
That's what I would. It's why it's what I did.
They think about players like C.C. Jefferson. They think about players like Jalen Collins. They think about players.
Casual bettors.
Yes, they think about players like Nick Truesdale, Shantavius Jones, like the playmakers that are on rosters, and they've got a bunch of them on this team, and they got some tall wide receivers and tight ends for Mark Trestman.
Well, I will say I'm very interested to see the tight end you just mentioned, Nick Truesdale, their first-round pick, made the roster as expected, but Coach Trestman talked about him a lot, said he was the best tight end available, so I really want to see him excel in this league because there's a big tight end in Dallas that we're going to get to pretty soon, so I don't know who's going to be better, but Trestman, I think he's going to run this team as a well-oiled machine. We talked to Jordan McRae last week, and while we were in Houston, and he really discussed the mentality that Trestman is instilling in this team, and I'm really excited to see this team perform. Do I think they're going to make over 7.5? To Alan's point, I don't know if any team is really going to make over 7.5, but it's still going to be an exciting football team to watch nonetheless.
I have a feeling this might be one of the most disciplined football teams in the league, but we'll see. But I have a feeling playing for Mark Trestman and knowing the offensive line that they have, a lot of really smart offensive linemen, starting with Jordan McRae, but also, I mean, you go to Andrew Tiller, Gerald Foster, Martez Ivey. These guys were all pretty damn good in college, at least from what I saw. And you're going to be looking at the Tampa Bay Vipers. I think my word discipline is what it's all about for them. They take on the Guardians on Sunday afternoon, February 9th in Week 1. 52-man now for the Dallas Renegades, who will be at home against St. Louis. Bob Stoops' team. I mean, a lot of good players on this team. Vince, what stands out to you on this roster the most?
I guess this is the team. I'm not necessarily as interested in the players, but I am just really interested in, just the scheme that they're going to run, with how Mummy pulling the strings on this offense. I will say one thing that I'd like to point out, though, is, everybody's expecting this, in this pass-happy offense out of this ball club. But, Oklahoma teams have been able to run the ball extremely well. And Cameron Artis-Payne, I'm not sure how much work that this guy is going to get. This guy is a powerful back, Alan, out of the SEC, University of Auburn. But this guy, if they give him the ball a lot, he could be somebody that just really pounds people down when they're not expecting it.
I want to say, I don't want to be a negative Nelly here, but the defensive line, I'm looking at it here, kind of leaves something to be desired, at least from recognizable and, what I know about the players throughout the league as a football nerd. Vince, I don't know if you could illuminate any of these guys, but their defensive ends, Frank Alexander, Winston Craig, we've had on the show, but I honestly haven't seen too much out of him. He played at Richmond. And then they have Galen Robinson, the defensive end who played at Purdue. Edge-wise, not so sure how they're going to look. And then defensive tackles, they only have 2 on the roster, and Tomasi Lalile and Tony Garrod. I mean, this defensive line is it's not really one that's packing a whole lot of punch on paper.
Well, I will say this: James Folston, who on this sheet, Bryant, you have listed as an outside linebacker. This kid played defensive end in college. Maybe a little undersized for a defensive end in a professional league, but was a defensive end at the collegiate level. Probably goes around 240, 250 pounds. And I've said this on the show before, to go back in the archives and listen. This guy's got one of the best bodies in the entire XFL. Hardly an ounce of fat on this cat. And he's ready to just go out there and get after it. So if you're talking about an outside pass rush, look for James Folston. He may not be listed as a defensive end, but he's somebody who could definitely bring a force off the edge.
I know we kind of faded away from this, but if I were to use one word to describe this team, it's unbelievable. I just can't believe it, right?
Yes.
Isn't that a good word?
Well said.
There is a tight end, Alan, the one that we keep talking about, Donald Parham, tight end, 6'8", 240 out of Stetson. I don't even know where that school is, but he was making some plays out in Houston. You guys know where Stetson is? I don't know where that is. Do you guys know where that is?
I'm going to say it's in Texas.
But he was making some plays down in Houston, so I'm really excited to see how Mummy uses his tight end in his game plan. Alan, also shout out to the PR team out there in Dallas for giving us enunciations for their team, finally giving us the truth behind Jeff Badet.
Oh, it's not Bidet?
No, it's Badet.
It's going to be exciting and fun, different.
Stetson University, shout out to DeLand, Florida, is where Donald
so not Texas. Yeah. See, you made yourself look worse because I took the high road. I was like, I don't know where this is.
I was just thinking of like Stetson hats, and I don't know. You learned something in the middle of a podcast.
Stick to colors, Alan. Stick to colors.
All right, let's go to the Dallas Renegades opponents, the St. Louis Battlehawks, and their 52-man roster and very tall defense very tall, and I think one of the best, at least from players that I recognize. Vince, Casey Sales, the defensive tackle. You've got Jake Payne, who's going to be wearing 00 at defensive tackle. And then, that's just so awesome.
So good.
Love it. And then linebacker Terrence Garvin will be in the middle of that defense. And of course, the big name everyone's talking about, Kenny Robinson, the safety. Although some people around the league might say, who's Kenny Robinson? They're about to learn, I think, come February 9th.
Well, I'll say this. I know who Kenny Robinson is, but to me, it seems like there's a whole lot being made out about this kid. To me, he sounds a little overrated.
Whoa!
I'm more interested to see Will Hill, to see what he's got left in the tank. I can't believe he's on the roster here out of Florida. Big time recruit from eons ago. So I'm fascinated to see, if you're talking defensive backs on this ball club, very, very excited to see.
So when we have Kenny Robinson on the show, which we're hoping to do, Vince, what are you going to say when we let him know that you called him overrated?
He's got to prove it. Prove me wrong.
Prove you wrong. It is said until proven guilty is not a thing in Vince's world. I will say this, and this was an interesting fact that we did way back when we talked pre-draft. Will Hill and Terrence Garvin were two of the 4 defensive players that we brought up as big time players that were going to be available in that draft, and St. Louis ended up with both of them. So I'm very interested to see this defense. We saw the size. I mean, it looked like a professional basketball team out there.
Scary.
They were tall individuals. They were ready to play. They were doing really well from what we saw in that first half, Alan.
Alan, you listed a bunch of guys, but I'll even go a little bit further. You got Dwayne Hendricks, defensive end. You got Will Clark, defensive end, a guy who could probably play inside or outside. There's a lot. This is one tough defense. I'll say that right now. Maybe the toughest.
And I'm gonna say my word for them is tall, because they're very tall defense too, and they're gonna bat a lot of balls down. And yeah, I cannot wait to see them in action. Just the physical presence of those players. I'm telling you, when you see them, St. Louis Battlehawks fans, your defense, when they run out there, your jaw will hit the floor. At the behemoths you got up and down from the defensive line to the secondary, it is quite impressive. Let's go now to our next roster and break down the DC Defenders, who will be opening up the season February 8th, first game, hosting the Seattle Dragons. And I'm really excited, I got to say, about the speed of that defensive secondary.
Fast.
I cannot wait to see fast Doran Grant, fast Bradley Sylvie. I can't wait to see fast Desmond Lawrence out there, fast Elijah Qualls even on the defensive line. Vince, they got some fast guys on the defense.
No doubt about it. Top to bottom here, all 3 levels. It looks like there's a lot of good speed that you're alluding to, and it's going to be extremely important. They have stocked up, it looks like, on interior defensive linemen, but all these guys are mobile, which is going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I noticed that watching them in the scrimmage. They had a defensive line that was rotating a lot, basically new guys out there. It was a scrimmage for every single possession, but they were moving. I mean, a lot of stunting, a lot of moving around on that defensive line. That's going to be fun to watch, I think, with the DC Defenders. But when you're talking about this roster, it starts and ends with, I think, a 3-headed monster, maybe even a 4-headed monster of running backs. Donnell Pumphrey, Jarrell Presley, Nick Brossette, who we hardly even saw in the scrimmage. Bryant didn't get a lot of reps, but I think is really capable. And Khalid Abdullah, I mean, they've got running backs who are not just fast, but I think guys who could all score touchdowns.
Well, you're talking about the running back group. I'm gonna go one step further and say I think there is a great chance that the league MVP comes from this team, depending on how the DC Defenders do. If they make enough wins, because from what I saw from Cardell Jones, I don't know if there's a hungrier man in that league, proving what he wants to prove, that he can still play this game. So those 3 running backs, led by Cardell Jones, tossing him some footballs, maybe taking a couple snap runs himself. Cardell Jones is I'm ecstatic to see what he's going to do with the DC Defenders this season.
The wide receiving core is also pretty interesting for the DC Defenders. They did get Rashad Ross, Rocket Ross, from the LA Wildcats, and they also maintain Tyler Palka, who was a pretty favorable target in the scrimmage, at least for Cardale Jones, Malachi Dupree, who could get downfield, and Eli Rogers, Vince, the former Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah, Eli, good slot receiver, ability to get open, which is going to be so important, establishing some rhythm with Cardale Jones. And I like what you said about Malachi Dupree. This guy, a tremendous speed on the outside, willing to stretch the field. Fast. The DC defenders are trying to do it. I can't keep up with the DC defenders, but they're going to take on the Seattle Dragons, and their roster finalized. They did announce, as we mentioned, Brandon Silvers will be starting at quarterback, and they have, I think, one of the beastliest running backs in Trey Williams, who we did not get to see in the scrimmage. Bryant, they had a lot of Kenneth Farrow out there. Jaquan Gardner had the Jukies at running back. I think they have three very solid. They almost have like a what are they called? A Hydra? Isn't that a three-headed dragon? They've got like a Hydra of running backs in Seattle.
Hydra 3. I don't know about that one. Alan, I'm going to say this, and it's only because I was so in awe of what I was seeing in front of me, but the Seattle Dragons really did impress me too much when they were playing in their scrimmage. I know that was only preseason. I know some of the starters were sitting out, but it seemed... Yes, thank you, Alan, for that. Hydra refers to a three-headed monster.
Look at that three-headed dragon. Isn't that cool?
Thank you very much. Instant correctiveness. I like that. I don't know, Vince. Maybe you can convince me otherwise just based on what you see on paper, because what I saw physically on the field, the team concerns me a little bit. I'd be a little worried if I was a Seattle Dragons fan.
Seattle, I'm not quite sure what they're trying to do. They have 5 tight ends on this roster. That just doesn't scream XFL to me. I'm not saying that there's bad players on this team at all. I really like Austin Prohl, wide receiver, for these guys. I think he could be an excellent target. We've spoken very highly of Keenan Reynolds, but I'm not quite sure exactly what their game plan is going to be.
It's just hard to decipher this team a little bit. I will say shout out to friend of the show, Anthony Johnson out of FIU, for making the roster. We had him back on way before
back in the before I think it was
before the summer showcases. Yeah. So, but still, yeah. Again, I don't want to judge everything based on that scrimmage. I don't want to base everything on what I'm seeing on paper. But Seattle, I'm having a little hard time trying to decipher what's going on there. But I'm glad I'm going to get to see them first as they battle DC in that opener.
Yeah, I'm going to give you my word for the Seattle Dragons, and that is run. And they do run the ball a lot, because I think you're talking about, again, a team that's got multiple guys who are capable of toting the rock, and if they could get a run game going, I think they have explosive playability on the ground. That'll make things easier on Brandon Silvers, who I know some people have doubts about and wanted to see BJ Daniels push him and maybe even overtake him. But I think with the running game, they've got, Kenneth Farrow could do everything, catch and run. Trey Williams is going to run some guys over, and then out of nowhere, I had never heard of Jaquan Gardner out of Humboldt State. To be honest, what I saw out of that guy, he was putting jocks on the floor. So they've got a capable running game. If that offensive line is, they're big too. They've got some big SEC, Big Ten type talent on the offensive line. This is a team that's going to, I think, have to rely on the run. And with all those tight ends, Vince, you got to imagine that's the plan.
I suppose so. Maybe they're going to be using those guys. They may be using those guys at multiple positions, for all we know. It's going to be interesting to see how they deploy, what sets they do. I guess we should assume a lot of 21 personnel, but we'll find out come February 8th.
Yes, H-backs maybe coming out of Seattle. We'll see. But there you have it. The 52-man rosters are finalized, and we just broke down each team's and I have a better idea of what these team identities are going to be. I mean, superlatives to, predict before the season starts here. I mean, we're going to have our predictions coming up with our, who's going to win the XFL championship. We're going to predict MVP and all of that in the coming weeks. What are you saying, for?
I didn't even tell you guys. I saw the original XFL championship trophy at the block party. It was pretty cool.
Wait, the original 2001 trophy.
The original 2001 trophy I saw. I had it in my hands because I could touch it because the LA Extreme won it. So I could actually touch the trophy, and yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Oh my! Well, all right. So you're gonna just brag to finish the show. Now I'm really jealous. Well, who's going to win the new trophy is what we're going to get into over the next few weeks as we get closer to kickoff. I mean, next week is going to be insane, but on Thursday, this week's show, we're going to start that process of predicting, and we're going to, start getting into a little bit more of the hype, because we're just going to be in our last preseason show, really, and it's going to be game week. And we're looking forward to having another good, crisp interview on Thursday, so make sure you stay subscribed. Make sure you tell your friends. Make sure you check us out on XFL YouTube, XFL.com. It's going to be a whole lot of fun and insane, really. We're going to be going at a quick DC Defenders type pace. And honestly, if we're kind of putting stamps on these teams to start, the most physical team, at least on paper to me, from what we went over today, Vince, the LA Wildcats. The fastest team, at least on paper to me, actually it's not the DC Defenders. I'm going to go with the Guardians, and I think we're going to see a very smart team in Tampa. I don't know about you. What did you take from those roster breakdowns?
I don't know. You could talk about the fastest. You could talk about the strongest. You could talk about the smartest. But I think it's going to end up being the most versatile. That's going to be the team that wins the most in this league, and I don't think we're really going to know that for another several weeks.
Being the fastest doesn't mean you always play the fastest, so that's always got to play out as well. Alan, I will say this: we have a lot to predict. I think we're going to get into MVP candidates, Defensive Player of the Year candidates, what we're going to think each conference. Win totals, all this stuff in the next few weeks leading up to this season, because we've got 3 episodes to kick off, maybe some small ones here and there, but there's a lot to predict headed into this inaugural season for the XFL.
Hey, I'm very excited to hear your prediction for Rookie of the Year.
I don't know. Well, Kenny Robinson, that's my prediction.
Most likely to be drafted. Go.
That's a good bet.
Drafted in what?
In the NFL. Come on.
Oh.
Careful now. Thank you again to the Wildcats for being so gracious with all their interviews and things and what they've provided for us here leading up to kickoff.
Yeah, check out those exclusive YouTube interviews Bryant did.
Yeah, so check those out on the YouTube page, youtube.com/XFL/XFL. Get your tickets. Like I said, I think I misspoke earlier that the first game was going to be in Seattle. It's actually going to be in Dallas. So Dallas, Houston, DC, and New York. Make sure you get your tickets because you want to be a part of this. I know I do, and unfortunately, I have a baby coming, so I'm probably not going to be.
Well, it is your fault because you're the one who timed out, when you conceived the... I don't want to get into it, but it's your own damn fault, Bryant. That's you're gonna have to live with it and live vicariously through Vince and I and Jake, who will be in DC week 1 for the very first game. We cannot wait, but I cannot wait for these next episodes, Vince. Who do you think Jake's gonna pick as the team he's gonna root for? That's also coming up.
I hate to even speculate on that.
You don't like to speculate at all. That's what we're doing over the next 3 weeks, man.
He needs more data during the season. Let him be.
I'm just leaving that up to the experts.
You're an expert, Vince. I know you don't like to admit it, but you are an expert. You've been covering this league. We just passed the 2-year anniversary of Vince McMahon making the announcement this past weekend of the XFL returning. So ever since that day, I would consider you an expert.
Just over 1 week from kickoff, but we're signing off until Thursday evening. We'll see you for the next episode. Make sure you follow us at XFL Show. Make sure you dial in to that XFL fan line if you ever want to leave a voicemail, 724-565-4XFL. And we'll see you on the next episode. For Vince, for Bryant, I'm Alan. This is the XFL Show. Remember,
they're listening.